Hello and good afternoon, friends. Today, I want to talk to you about a situation that happened with a client of mine. And I want to kind of go through a little bit of like what could have happened, what did happen, what kind of things should you pay attention to. Let's get into it. So to start, this particular property was built in 1992, roughly, somewhere in the late 1992, early 1993, doesn't really matter. But this house is over 30 years old. The property has only really been maintained by an individual. This particular individual has never touched the septic system whatsoever. So it's been 30-something years since anybody has laid eyes on this system at all. And this is not super uncommon, especially for older individuals who occupy homes. If you're an older person, that's fine, right? It's just that's the way that they did things back in the day. Back in the 40s, 50s, and 60s, most of these properties would have had, a cesspool, a pipe into the woods, a pipe into the creek. That's just how they did things back in the day. And when everybody switched from those systems to septic tanks, the thought process was that you don't need to pump the tank. Now, this is a really, really bad idea, and let's kind of get into why. But they didn't think that they needed to pump the tank. And so what they would do is they would install a septic tank, they would install the drain fields or the dry well, depending on who built it. And the conventional wisdom was you just let it sit and do its thing. Septic systems inherently on their own are an ecosystem, right? The bacteria that's coming from our gut with the solids are going to the tank, and the tank's just a big pit that everything kind of collects. Now, if everything is working in a perfect theoretic world, you shouldn't have to necessarily worry about any of those solids building up too much and causing problems. And the reason why that was the thought is the bacteria that's in your belly continues to digest the solids once it reaches the tank. And so because that bacteria continues to digest the solids, it will break down those solids even further and further until eventually they disappear. The flaw in that logic, one, we have terrible diets as Americans, right? Everybody always makes fun of us for it, but it's true. We all have a bad diet. Two, we're producing way more solids than what these bacteria are capable of handling. You might say, oh, well, we can take bacteria stimulants and stuff like that, but there's no proof that any of that stuff works. And I can say that because the University of Kentucky, Pennsylvania, Maryland, all of them say that they help, but they will not solve the need for pumping your tank. Basically every health department in our state, even the state government, says pumping the tank is the most effective way to take care of your system, right? So we'll just kind of throw that out there. But if we have a system that's working and doing the thing that it's supposed to do, everything's playing nice, you wouldn't have to worry about it. But because we produce so much water and solids so fast, there's not really any time for that debris to break down, right? And when I use the term debris or solids, basically we're talking poo, right? Poo, human waste, toilet paper, all that good stuff. It's all basically in the tank, right? So we have a tank that was installed. Installer tells this guy, you don't need to pump the tank at all. Homeowner takes that advice because somebody who's more knowledgeable than him told him to do that. And now we have a couple problems, right? So let's kind of get into what's going on. So you got your tank, 30 years old. In our area, these absorption systems are designed to last about 30 or 40 years. The absorption system will fail based off of the biomat and the sludge and all sorts of junk getting into the absorption system and plugging it up. Now, you can have saturation from excessive water, right? Let's just say that, for example, we've had 4 inches of rain over the last 48 hours. That's a lot of water. That can influence the functionality of the system. In some circumstances, they should have been designed to address groundwater intrusion, even excessive volumes like that, right? You can manipulate the property to deal with that. But in this particular circumstance, that's not the problem. The drain field will fail, just how it works, and the solids are basically the major contributing factor, right? So this homeowner, 30-something years, hasn't pumped it. Installer told him, no, you don't need to worry about pumping it. So he didn't think anything of it. He's like, oh, all right, well, hey, system's doing what the installer told me to do. Everything should be fine. So we pop open the tank. There's basically 50% of that tank is just solid sludge. And parts of the tank are starting to fall apart. And the issue is all of these little pieces don't cost a whole lot, but in combination, it adds up very quickly. So we got a couple $100 here, a couple $100 there, a few $100 there, a few $100 here. Now you're getting very easily close to $2,000, $3,000, $4,000, $5,000, depending on if you do everything. And why I want to have this conversation is you will get a lot of people who do installs, right? Contractors, but you will also get a lot of older homeowners generally. The newer, younger homeowners, they don't necessarily align with that same mindset, or at least in my experience, right? But you'll get some opinions from people who may not necessarily be as well-versed in whatever subject you're asking them about. It's okay to ask for advice from neighbors, family members, or other contractors. But why I want to have this conversation is I think it's very, very important to make sure that if somebody tells you something and you're not sure, ask for the source, right? So for example, I told you the University of Kentucky. If you ask, or if I tell you something, the only reason I'm telling you something about a particular product or a particular method or a way of doing something is because somebody way smarter than me has done the study and proved that works, right? Or they've disproved that something works. That's why, for example, nowadays we have aerobic treatment systems. Why? Because they remove nitrogen from the wastewater far more efficiently than anaerobic septic systems. Different conversation, different time, but somebody way smarter than me figured that out, right? Somebody way smarter than most of us figured that out. So it's very important to make sure that if somebody says something, they have to have a source or somebody else to back up whatever they claim. It's the scientific method, right? You can make a claim, then you have to test it and prove that claim. Now, maybe what we are discussing right now, if we come back to this in 10 years, maybe it's changed. Maybe somebody else found something new, and that changes the discussion. So it's one of those things where if somebody says something, they should have a source to at least tell you why what they're saying works. And if that source changes over the course of 30 years, right? So this guy was told 30 years ago, you don't need to pump the tank. Well, over the last 20 years, everybody has been pushing for more pumping because so many of those other systems keep failing, and because nobody else has really been able to break through to him, he never really saw the importance of it. So if you're told one thing and then a little while later you're told something else, don't get defensive, right? It's okay. I learn all the time about different things in this industry, and that's perfectly okay. I'm not right about everything every day, and that's fine. That's how we learn and grow. What I really want to make sure, though, is that we're all on the same page, that just because one person says something does not mean that it is the end-all be-all and the perfect truth. Just because multiple people say one thing doesn't necessarily mean they're also correct. There's a little bit of a gray area in this world of well and septic. Every system is slightly different, and what I usually recommend is talk to your local county health department, right? The person who's going to know what's going on in your area is going to be the sanitarian for your local area, right? So if somebody was to call me from Nebraska, I have never been in Nebraska. I don't know anything about their geology. I don't know anything about their practices. Now, I would imagine most of their septic systems, most of their wells are probably very similar to how we do things. But if you ask me, hey, can we put 2 trenches on a 4-bedroom house? I'd be like, I have no idea, right? And the reason why is I don't know what's going on over there. So you want to make sure you call a local person. After you do that, if you're trying to research something like additives or any other kind of stimulant to put in for the bacteria, look up the local universities in your area. So like, for example, I picked Maryland and Pennsylvania. We're 30 minutes away from PA. Okay, why wouldn't I look to see what Pennsylvania is doing? Because we're basically neighbors. And a lot of our licensure is reciprocal, right? So if you're licensed to inspect or work on Pennsylvania, you can apply to get that same license over here, and it doesn't take that much more effort, right? So long story short, I think this guy got lucky that his whole system didn't fail, but because he was misguided in the beginning by another contractor, it kind of put him in this weird predicament that he probably didn't want to be in. And I think that it's important to make sure that everybody knows that just because you're told one thing doesn't mean it'll always be that way. And I think it's important to make sure that we as a people grow. And the septic world, it's getting more and more advanced, right? The style of septic system that we're doing right now only started happening in our area in the 1980s. That is not a super long time. If you go back to the 1940s, they were just starting to do it, and they were still using cinder blocks for septic tanks, outhouses, pipes into woods, pipes into creeks. They were doing all sorts of different things, and if you go back even beyond that, it's basically just cesspools and pipes into the woods or the creek. It's important, it's interesting, but it is important to make sure that we grow and we learn. It's not a static thing, right? That's why it's science. So I hope that you found this useful. I hope that you found this informative. If you enjoy content like this, hit that like button, hit subscribe. I have more videos posted every day on the world of well and septic. And until next time, guys.